Hi, everybody. Welcome to Signal and Insights, the podcast exploring how leaders in the research and data space are navigating today's challenge. I am Gabriel, CEO of Crowd Answers. This show is about what is really working, the idea, the technology, and the decision moving the needle for people building the future of consumer intelligence. Today, I am joined by Katie Hamilton is Katie or Katie?
Kayte.
Perfect. Kate, the good founder of the social question and creator of Scribe Q, a platform that does something genuinely new. It captures and transcribes Instagram stories, questions, sticker responses before they vanish, turning those into authentic, fleeting conversations into structured market research data. Kate is a Green Book Future List honoree, a keynote speaker on play and creativity, and someone who has rethought how and where consumer insight happen. Kate, welcome to Signal and Insights.
Thank you for having me.
Good. Let's start at the beginning. You have a background in advertising and consumer insight, 10 years plus moderating focus groups. What led you to build something completely new instead of staying on the traditional path?
Yeah. So I think a bulk of my why story is really driven by my hearing loss disability. It's something that I was born with. I was actually the first female in my family to have a diagnosed hearing loss. Several people in my family have cochlear implants. I'm getting very close to that level of loss. I'm just like 1 or 2 points away from it now. But when I first started in traditional research, in qualitative, in moderating, in those kinds of approaches and methodologies, I knew it would not be a forever path for me just because of my hearing loss. The larger the room, the larger the focus group, the bigger the event, the more noisy the environment was always be a challenge for me, regardless of technology keeping up with the hearing loss solutions. So it became a bit of a problem for me, maybe like 5 or 6 years in, when I really had to start thinking, do I want to stay in marketing research? If I do, what type of role could I have or even potentially create for myself? Because I love being the first person to hear directly from consumers. That was one of the things that led me into research outside of advertising. I had a hard time being the voice of the customer without actually hearing the voice of the customer. I wanted to be the person asking those questions, hearing those answers, kind of like 1 degree of separation rather than reading a report or listening from the back room. Um, so the reason why, or what led me why to creating the social question, was because I had to create something that would satisfy my disability, support an unknown or kind of like white space opportunity in the research community. And then really as a woman, I I say this kind of laughingly, or jokingly, but we need a lot more opportunities for women to lead, from a work-life balance perspective as well as from an idea perspective. So there was a little bit of that as part of my founding story as well.
Okay, that's amazing. And I imagine. I mean, you deal day to day in a very normal way, right? I mean, you can talk with people like a regularly, right? That's great. Yeah,
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 it depends a
perfect.
lot on technology. Like right before we started this call, I had to make sure that I had access to captions so that I could literally read and transcribe the conversation that's happening in real time. I often read lips and depend on video meetings like we're doing right now so that I can kind of see somebody's behavior, which all of that leads from my qualitative moderator training, right? Like it helps a lot in my everyday. But I would not be able to do my job without technology, that's for sure.
That's great. I mean, because technology right now is helping us in many ways that is basically expanding our capabilities and giving us like a superpowers in a way. Yeah. And when did you see first like the Instagram stories as a research opportunity? And what's was the moment you realized no one had built the infrastructure to capture it?
Yeah, so the story for that goes all the way back to 2015, 2016-ish, so almost a decade ago, which does not feel like it's been that long, that 10 years went by in a flash. But Instagram created stories as a feature on Instagram's platforms. That was not always part of the engagement strategy. Instagram, when it first started, was literally just a photo sharing. Then it moved into a little
Yes.
bit of video. Then it created Instagram stories, which are a 24-hour cycle for followers, and then the information disappears. It's a little bit leaning from like the Snapchat community with the stories feature. And then through that evolution, Instagram actually used influencers and creators with 10,000 or more followers as a test market for new features within their platform. I don't think a lot of people realize that. It's less apparent now as it was then, but before you could get access to like secret features, you had to have a $10,000 follower account, not dollars,
Followers.
threshold in order to get access to things. So one of those access pieces was questions and polling and actually being able to use a sticker to collect feedback rather than just getting comments in a DM or comments on a post or whatnot. It was just this new complete ecosystem. And when I saw that come around in 2016 and 2017, and more creators were starting to poll their followers with that technology, my two worlds collided, right? As a focus group moderator and a market researcher, I'm asking people questions all of the time, and I need a means to collect that data. And I was seeing influencers and creators essentially becoming community moderators in our sense of the world. Um, they have a community of 10,000 or more people. They're asking questions to learn more. Sometimes it's recommendations. Sometimes, the questions vary so widely. But I really thought when I saw this question asking ability happening on Instagram, that either Instagram and or their parent company Meta would do something with this data collection. It was just a whole new avenue of exploring Q&A. And so I sat back on my haunches for 4 or 5 years because who am I to compete with Meta or Instagram? Or who am I to say that this is such an amazing idea? Clearly, they would have the data on their end to do something with it. Well, 4 to 5 years in, I realized they were doing nothing with it. A lot of times those Instagram stories replies for the longest time just vanished after 24 hours. So some of these creators were getting hundreds to thousands of responses in 24 hours to the questions that they were asking their community. And the only way to analyze that data was within that 24-hour period, opening the app and like scrolling through the replies. There was no way to download it, to export it, to summarize the top themes or comments. Just any of the analytics that we're used to in research was not happening with creators at all. 2 or 3 years later, those stopped vanishing. You could find them in archive, but you still could not download or extract them. And so that's when I realized, if nobody's going to solve this problem, can I solve that problem? Is this a risk that I should take? Because as somebody who comes from a data and research background, I'm just witnessing in real time these creators getting such thoughtful responses to things, and then we can't do anything with it. It's just an empty data exchange, which was really irking me.
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I recall a conversation with the director of Facebook Insights back in 2017, and I asked, "What are you gonna do with the data?" And he responded exactly that. We don't know yet. I mean, the company priorities right now is more on advertising, and this basically entails all things about privacy and personal data that I don't know the company and I mean, and we are not researchers. I mean, he accepted very humbly. I mean, of course, he do research, but he was in a position basically to take advantage of the data. I said, like, oh my God, how it happened? Because they had all this pulling of data, and yeah, that's great that
Back
you have been able. and you
Back in
went back in.
2022, when I started the social question, I happened to be at a marketing research event, and there were 2 women there from Instagram. And I didn't give away too much about the tech that I was building or things like that, but I did let them know that I partner with influencers and creators, and I have those influencers and creators host my research questions to their community. That's part of the methodology that I created or developed when I launched the social question was not just how do we transcribe the data, but how do we partner and leverage those relationships that creators have with their followers. And those 2 women literally looked at each other and they were like, why don't we do that? We have access to all of these influencers and creators. Like, why are we not asking them to ask our questions? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. But it's literally in your lap on your front door. And even since having that conversation, I have not seen hashtag meta partners asking research questions on their platform. It's such a white space opportunity because the partnerships that I had been able to do in the last 4 to 5 years since I've started have been really fascinating because I know that we'll get to this conversation in a few minutes, so apologies if I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but I find that the level of authenticity that comes through these Instagram replies and Instagram question asking is unparalleled to what you would get in a survey or even potentially in a focus group because it's a parasocial relationship that marketing research cannot replicate, right? If you have a really strong creator that has developed a really close-knit community of 100,000 people, which sounds like an oxymoron, right? How can you be a close-knit community with hundreds of thousands of people in a community? It's all about how that moderator engages with those followers, that they feel like it's an internet bestie. They feel friendly. It's a trusted environment in a safe space that as researchers, we will always be a stranger no matter how much rapport we try to build at the beginning of a focus group or how friendly we try to make a survey or like how casual language we use, we will never be intimate with our research participants the way that Instagram communities have popped up and evolved over time on social media. So getting the chance to tap into that, we get a lot more detailed responses. We get responses actually that don't even show up in traditional research. We did a case study, or we have a case study from a project we did last year with a moving company, where some of our social media insights that we pinged before they did the traditional focus group, before they did the traditional survey, they made a mention in their final report that, this stuff came up on social. It did not come up in the traditional sense, but we still think there's value there. We still think that this needs to be explored a little bit deeper. And I think that goes that level of authenticity and trust that people are willing to share a different perspective with their internet best friend more so than they are with a corporate company or a stranger in a survey.
100%. And one of the way that I got, that the podcast is going well is because the interviewer or the guest basically start responding questions that I have in my burner because this is one of the main things, right? Instagram stories, is where people are more unfiltered, and basically they are behaving that like their own, and they will never respond in a brand survey the way they respond here. So I am also amazed why they it has been taking so long for research industry to pay attention to that. And let's continue that conversation because you serve two different clients. So basically, market researchers who need insights, and creators who want to understand and monetize their audience. How those two sides connect and which one is the harder sell for you right now?
Yeah, it's definitely harder to sell to creators, my services. And I think part of that challenge is because Meta and Instagram, more specifically, has not told, shown, or explained the value of the data that creators are collecting, right? There's no opportunity to monetize your Instagram replies like you can a reel from views and watchability and ad sharing and that kind of thing. Our partnerships on social media are not even covered under Instagram's monetization policies because they're not a traditional advertisement. We still disclose that there's a partnership happening, there's a collaboration happening, that there's still money being exchanged when we're partnering with a creator or an influencer, but this territory is such a wild west.
Wild West.
So part
Wow.
of the challenge of selling to creators is because they don't understand the value of it. A lot of them have never heard of market research or marketing research before. They've never been a research participant. A lot of our vocabulary and terminology does not transition to this community. And I think that speaks to the broader challenge that we've always had of marketing and marketing research. I've always considered them like stepsisters of each other. They're from the same umbrella of understanding the consumer, understanding products, understanding your market, but they don't collaborate with each other. And so a lot of times when I'm partnering with a creator, most of the time I have to introduce them to what research is. I have to negotiate their rates a little bit differently because it doesn't fall under a traditional media
Collab.
kit type engagement. I don't need
Yeah.
to make a funny reel. I don't need like stock photography. I don't need like a white labeled selling approach. I just need you to show up on your stories like you usually do, casually mention that you're working with the social question. And for example, right now we've been doing something with perimenopause and menopause communities. So we're going to peri and menopause creators. So it's like we're going to you because you already have these conversations. This should feel like a low level lift. We just want to capitalize on a portion of the conversation that you're having. This is one time engagement kind of situation. And creators are often like they get light bulbs. So they're like, it's that simple. Like you're not underselling it. And I'm like, no, it's really that simple. I just need you to go on stories, explain the collaboration, host a couple of questions, and you're done. It's not that challenging. So it's starting to catch on. I'm getting a lot more word of mouth, creators referring other creators. I think another challenge that we have in our industry, which is not new, but is payment terms, if I can get really detailed for a moment. Creators expect payment either like day of, some of them expect a prepayment. A handful of them I can get within like a 15 and 20-day payment window, but 30 days or longer with the creator is much more challenging. And if I can't meet their financial requests, they're going to deprioritize the authenticity of our relationship, right? Like they're going to put even lower energy into an already low level type engagement, or they might miss their deadline, or they won't take it as seriously because I've already said that I'm not going to be able to pay them for 45 days or whatever that might be. So trying to work within marketing budgets compared to marketing research payment
That's right.
processes is a real tension point that I have. I don't think I'm going to be the one to solve it, but I think it's becoming more and more challenging, not just with small shops like my own, but with others, that as marketing and marketing research become less like stepsisters and more like traditional family members, I think we're hopefully going to resolve some of those tension pieces because that's a big barrier and a big obstacle that I have with some of the creators that I'm onboarding.
Yeah, and in front of the client, we can say, no, for this specific study, we require 60% or 100% of the recruitment for costs in advance because some clients won't accept that. You know, they are used to get these 90 days payment terms or whatever, and it's hard to navigate. Yeah, I follow on that. And talking about these research buyers again, how traditional research buyers perceive social first methodologies? Are they open to it or still a little bit skeptical about the validity and you know and rigor of the research?
I see traditional researchers underutilizing and almost ignoring social intelligence and social listening. Part of that's not their fault. I think that the social listening and social intelligence platforms also don't open researchers with open arms into their environments. A lot of that, again, has to come down to costs. Most of social intelligence platforms are going to require an annual license, and they're geared towards brand buyers and not research buyers. So for ad hoc research teams, which is what more my background, we're project based, right? Like I just mentioned perimenopause. I've also been doing something in the moving space right now. I'm working on new computer buyers, and then I'm going to be doing a recycling study in a major US city coming up. If I were to try to get a license per client, that just does not make any financial sense. I need
Sense.
like ad hoc access. So I think if those platforms could open up new revenue streams on their end and welcome ad hoc research analysis into their portfolios, I think we would see a lot more collaboration that just doesn't exist right now. Um, I also think that people still think that social media is a fad, which I don't quite I don't know how to reconcile that thought process because it's been around for all of my adult life, even longer for some other individuals because I'm a millennial. And it's not going away. If anything, it's getting more integrated, more evolved, more detailed, more access to information. Now, it's not perfect, right? We know there's a ton of misinformation, disinformation that happens on the social media interwebs, if you will. But you still have to be aware of that, right? I think with traditional research, when you stay in a rigid structure of just focus groups or just surveys or just online communities or whatever the approach or methodology is, that's a very sterile research environment. I think that comfortable for a lot of people. They have boundaries that they are set between, and there's no room for surprises. The data is going to come in as exactly as you would expect it. And social media data feels too loose. It feels too unchartered. It feels too unstructured. And to me, that's what I like because I'm a little squirrely energy myself. I like being able to go into different directions or seeing what one Reddit community says versus an Instagram community versus a Facebook group. Because the reality is, people are doing their own research, right? How often do we see that phrase in a comment section? Do your own research. Go to Google. Do your research. I did my research. You need to look it up. You need to ask these questions. Research is happening without us on social media and on the internet. And so if we only stick to traditional methods with those closed loop boundary like data collections, I think we're missing a large part of what's happening in real time and not just reported behavior versus observed behavior. And so we really need to see better integrations between the two.
I agree 100%. I think one of the things that define the researchers is the curiosity and the ability to adapt and the ability to find the consumers with basically they are like I'm making decisions. And one of the things that happen with social media is not only a channel for top of the funnel, I mean for awareness or consideration, but also around purchasing and loyalty. So basically with the e-commerce and everything, all the channels that basically or the possibilities that Instagram offers, and not only Instagram, other channels as well. So a lot of people buy things just because they watch something nice and good and related and connected at a human level on Instagram, like watching a post. And this happened. It's actual things. So yeah.
I think 10 years ago, when the swipe up feature appeared, impulse buying completely changed from our traditional sense of impulse buying, right? The things we were taught, at least the things I was taught in undergrad and graduate school when it came to impulse buying, were those things you see at the checkout line, right? Or the things that weren't on your shopping list, but you went to the store and you picked them up anyways. People are impulse buying overnight. They're impulse buying throughout the day because their internet bestie is sharing something or they're seeing a social media ad on something. Impulse buying has gone through the roof. Now, obviously, that has its pros and cons from a personal level when you're spending so much that you're not anticipating or expecting. We have a whole issue happening with the credit crisis in America. But impulse buying has largely changed because of social media. And I don't think we do enough to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to confess, and this is something that happened. Basically, I start receiving, packaging in my house, and because my wife is correlated, the amount of hour that she spent on Instagram. I am more like an Amazon person, and right now I try to avoid a little bit, but she's super on Instagram. And what is this device? And it's specifically for kind of thing that is like a more like a treats for herself, for like a personal care, or rather than useful things. I mean, she believes because it's connected exactly with what she's watching. It's very personal. It's like a affordable pleasures in a way that she can get through these channels. And this is something that happens, and brands should be aware that this is something, going on. Yeah. Yeah.
I would it's not part of my current research strategy or my projects, but I would love to, like, do a deep dive into pricing strategy in 2026 in with this impulse idea in mind. 'Cause I think for the longest time, impulse buys, if we're going back to that in-store, at the counter, during checkout situation, it was usually a couple of dollars that you were considering versus, "Oh, $20 with free shipping? Yeah, that's reasonable. Yeah, I can afford that." And then before you know it, it's 5 $20 purchases. But because you're not physically touching the item or checking out in an online environment or directly from social media or whatever it might be, I think pricing has completely changed as part of this environment as well. It's just all goes back to say that I just don't think we have social media insight integrated well enough in our other data practices. I think it's still too siloed that we really need a better job of combining the marketing, the traditional research, the social media insight together so that these three teams and ecosystems have a better opportunity to truly know the customer, to truly learn from the consumer. Because I think right now we're still putting things together piecemeal, and marketing teams are still a lot of times not talking to research teams, which is really, really unfortunate.
Yeah, especially in some companies and structure that are so siloed, and basically they don't learn from each others. Yeah. Yeah. And about the pricing thing, yeah, it could be a whole podcast about talking about, price elasticity on social media versus like a face to face or retail. Yeah. So for a matter of times, let's talk about Scribe Q and current reality. So, walk me through Scribe Q. How does it actually work? A created post, a question sticker, the responses come in, they disappear in 24 hours. What happens in between that makes those responses useful for research?
Yeah, so ScribeQ is something that I had to completely imagine from scratch, and I am not a developer, I am not a coder. I hired a team to develop the app that I have made that I use privately. Um, I knew organically through my own research, do your research. I took myself to influencer conferences and to influencer shows, was kind of a fly on the wall attendee, kind of like slowly, slyly asking creators how they solved this problem, right? Because a lot of them, like I said before, would get hundreds of thousands of responses and there's nothing they can do with it. I met somebody who had over 1 million followers. And she asked a question. She had a hysterectomy. She was very young when she had her hysterectomy. It was not a traditional medical procedure that she needed to have. And she essentially did an AMA and asked me anything. What do you want to know about hysterectomy surgery? What questions do you have? Like, how can I help answer any questions or just give you some insight into what happened during the surgery and why? She said that she was on bed rest for 2 weeks, and she took those 2 weeks of literally just scrolling through the replies with, pen and paper next to her, tallying and, like, making her own information so that she could get the top 10 most asked question or whatever it may be. And so I knew back then, if somebody with 1 million followers did not have any technology access to do that tallying work, to do that thematics, or to do that analysis, then nobody does. Because if they're gatekeeping that access to at the 1 million plus level, then I could understand that, right? Like we talked about, they gate Instagram used to gate sort of specific features to specific follower count levels, but it just didn't
Mhm.
exist. So I obviously knew pen and paper was not going to be the solution that I needed to create. I also knew that Instagram is very protective over their API. Which, of course, they should be, and I'm not docking that by any means, but I did not have anything on my radar to try to, like, backdoor their API and get direct access to creator accounts. The reality is those replies that are coming in through Instagram Stories exist exclusively in that creator's account. So, as a follower, I can't go, to their feed and find the replies. I can't go to, like, a highlight reel and find the replies. So they also never exist in social media and social intelligence, right? The other challenge that a lot of people asked me about when I first created Scribe Q was, why don't I just make a Chrome extension? A Chrome extension can get me access to this information, and it just shows how little they understand social media apps and platforms, because this information is only available within the Instagram app. Even if I were to go to Instagram.com and go to the website version, I can't access that information. So a Chrome extension literally does nothing. It is not a solution by any means. So instead, what I am doing, which is not going to be part of the scalable solution, but was part of the current solution, is I have signed contracts with every creator. And then those creators send me video recordings of their replies. So, yes, it does still involve them going into their account, opening the replies, going into that section, but they can quickly scroll through. They don't have to be reading them. I don't need a 30-minute long video of them scrolling through them. They just need to scroll through. And I take that screen recording, and we have essentially Frankensteined a new solution. It's not yet patentable. I have invested that I have investigated that part yet. I'm sorry, I have investigated it, and it's not patentable yet. But essentially, we're taking the video recording, we're slowing it down to 1-second increments. Then we're using OCR technology to overlay onto the video, because OCR for video doesn't exist. If I were to create that, that would be a game changer. We haven't quite gotten to that level. And then we also recode usernames. And I think that's the biggest security situation for one of the reasons why Meta does not tackle this. I do not sell that username data in my studies, and it's exclusively discussed with my social media creators that they are also not selling their followers information or their followers usernames. I
Got it.
recode all of the usernames that are going to be on screen, just like you would code a survey respondent or use a code to identify somebody in a qualitative session. And so that was integral as part of the technology that I wanted to build. So I wanted to make sure that we had that privacy built in, and that those original videos with that personal information were also destroyed and was not held in the cloud or held in our server. So everything deletes within 7 days. If I need to rerun the data, I need to get a fresh video and re-upload the video, so the videos are not stored indefinitely on any kind of system. And then we also dedupe, right? So if we're scanning at like a 1-second increment, there is the possibility that somebody was at the top of the screen at the beginning of a second and at the bottom of the screen at the end of the second. So we do some quality control checks for that component, just to make sure that we didn't double dip anybody. There were a lot of iterations in the beginning. A lot of things that OCR had a challenge with initially, like emojis. Emojis was really hard for them to interpret. It would either like break or give me like a scattered set of code for what an emoji should have been. If somebody had text in their profile picture, so if you've seen Instagram reply data, it has a teeny, teeny, teeny little thumbnail of somebody's picture, their username, and then the reply that they had. And then there's actually some additional text as well that we ignore as part of the overlay. But if they have text in that photo, even as tiny and as ineligible as it for the human eye, it would still come up and like interrupt systems. So we had a lot of testing and iterations that we had to go through. So right now it's working. It has been working for the last 2.5 years in my private beta testing mode, where, again, like I said, I have private contracts with each creator. I'm negotiating the access to that information per person as part of a specific research initiative. So these are happening in very closed loop environments, one-to-one. To scale, I have some ideas in mind, but the biggest challenge that I'm up against is getting creators to care about the data, which is just going back to Instagram not giving them any access to the data or knowing what the data means. That's the biggest fight that up against with creators who might want forever access to the data. Um, I have to get them to care.
Of course. And I imagine also, because in Instagram, people sometimes they don't type actual, you know, whole conversations. Sometimes it's acronym. Some emojis mean something, some others mean something else, depending on the context.
That's
There is
actually
like a
something
many
that
things to
we
account.
Yeah, that is actually something that we, worked through from a troubleshooting perspective as well. Instagram has character count limitations. So one person might respond 4 times to get their full thought through because they got stuck at a certain character count limit.
Yeah.
So when I
Uh-huh.
am recoding usernames, I do recode like usernames. So if the same person, Sally Sue 15, answered 4 times, Sally Sue is gonna be recoded to the same user so I can see that trajectory and that
The whole
story.
information. Yeah.
Then it gets a little bit creative with the order of which those are presented because Sally Sue is responding at the same time 15 other people are responding. So by the time Sally Sue sends in one response, there might be 5 others before we see the second Sally Sue response. Um, the videos are also inverted. The most recent response is at the top, and the original response is at the bottom. So we had to make sure in those situations where we had Sally Sue 15 responding multiple times, exactly, we had to flip the data after it was transcribed so we could get the story in the right order.
The order.
So that was very painful for my developer team as we were, like, navigating those, like, kind of, like, more intimate situations. We've also had a couple of interruptions within stories as well. There was a short period of time where people could upload a video response instead of just texting, or they could upload a photo instead of just texting, or, some people had, like, an unlimited character count. Most of that experimentation has kind of gone away. People have gone back to just traditional writing. I think Instagram's even pulled back some of those integrations because all of those were interrupting the overall scrolling component. Because if we got
Experience.
that kind of like multimedia response, you had to stop the scroll, open it, expand it. Then we'd have to like, code the program to observe when that pause happened and that kind of thing. We were able to work around it when needed to, but that's become less of an issue that we needed to move through. But nonetheless, it was still fascinating to see Instagram still rolling out and experimenting with that feature. But Instagram doesn't even tell people how many people responded. Like, they literally do nothing with this data. So when I try to partner with a creator and I'm like, well, how many typical responses do you get when you post a story with a question in it? They're literally like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay,
Don't
we're
know. I
scrolling for
need
like
to count them.
scrolling for
Yeah.
like hours. Like,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
gives me
To
a
find
little bit
out.
of context. Which just
Yeah.
giving them that number, like, you get total number of views, you get total number of clicks, you get total number of people who viewed your profile. Why is total number of responses not a basic tally that Instagram provides? They just literally
Yeah.
do nothing with
They
this
do
part.
nothing. Yeah, because I think in Twitter you at least have the number of replies, like a summarize on. Yeah. So, and then like, what does a successful research project through the social question look like? Talk to me. Like, if you walk me through one, what did the brand want to know? How did you get it, and what they do with it?
Yeah, I think the most obvious answer that I can give, we'll go back to that moving case study that we published last year just because I can talk a little bit more in detail about it. That particular team had not done any national advertising in close to a decade. It was something like 8 or 9 years. They had not done a national ad campaign. They'd been kind of checked out of what was happening in the moving space. So before they generated a kitchen sink traditional research opportunity, they wanted to just find out what they could from social media. What are people already saying? And then is there a tangent within the social media conversation that we need to explore more deeply so that we can create an ad campaign, create a conversation that's worthy of discussion or of importance to somebody who's potentially moving. So that initial strategic kind of like pre-research phase is where a lot of teams come to the social question. We kind of know that there's something happening in this territory, in this trend, in this topic, but we need help pinpointing it, right? because they don't have access to social intelligence tools. They don't have access to social listening tools or any kind of like sophisticated analytics. So in those cases, we're going to do like a light scan on their behalf. I have a couple of consultants that I can work with that truly are in the social intelligence space. Then we'll take that information and find some creators to help bring what's happening passively and bring it into an active dialogue, right? I'm saying active because the creator is going to host this question. It's not just a binary, how many mentions involved moving company and DIY in whatever Boolean code search that you were putting together. We're actually hiring creators to host these questions. We then hired 3 creators. One was doing, a same-sex local move, first time bringing 2 households together, so there was that kind of, like, nuanced moving situation. One was a military cross-country move, so it was hiring professional movers to go literally from East Coast to West Coast, Virginia to California. And then a third one was also West Coast. It was, I think, a combination of DIY professional movers. It was different towns over, but one family moving, not families combining. So we tried to combine like different moving elements and aspects. All of those creators we had been monitoring to check their moving status to make sure that when we had them bring some moving questions to the table, that it wasn't coming out of left field. They had been documenting and describing and working up the move conversation with their community months in advance for most of these people with this move in mind. So the collaboration wasn't random. And then we created 2 things from a data analysis perspective. We had the responses that came directly from Instagram. However, I'm usually limited to how many questions I can ask on Instagram before people kind of check out. The sweet spot is like 3 to 4 questions, and 1 or 2 of those is gonna be more of like a close-ended poll, not 3 or 4 written open-end questions the whole time, because we have to think about the social media user behavior, right? They didn't come to Instagram to answer questions. They came to Instagram to be entertained, to get updates from their community,
Yeah.
like for
It's a the
escapism.
Tom is the king. Yeah. They start like typing things, typing, they don't, yeah. They
Exactly.
lose the track.
So
Yeah.
we chose the what we thought were the hardest hitting questions that all 3 creators asked. So we had continuity that they all asked the same questions, they all positioned them the same way. They didn't have overlapping audiences, that we would get unique impressions and we weren't in an echo chamber of the same people answering the same questions across all creators. That's something else that we look for when we're doing multiple. But then we also shared a link to a Google form, which for all intents and purposes is essentially a survey. But by adding a link to a survey within Instagram, people who wanted to continue the conversation had more that they wanted to share, were interested in the conversation and dialogue, could send that survey to themselves later, right? Like when you open up a website in Instagram, you can save it or send it to yourself or bookmark it or come back to it. Or if they kind of temporarily leave Instagram, we still try to keep all of those questions to typically 10 questions or less. So again, something they can just like quickly scan through on one page. There's no skip logic. It's not going to be a fancy if this, then that survey
No, no,
type
no.
programming. All of the questions are going to be optional because somebody might want to weigh in on one question and not on another question. I think altogether we had 6 or 7,000 responses across
Wow.
all of those touch points, right? The 3 creators and Instagram stories plus the Google form information. So that was obviously a lot of data to get through. And keep in mind, when influencers post on Instagram stories, it's a 24-hour cycle, one day. So one day of field work per creator. I
For
think 2
thousands of
days, so
responses,
2 to 3 days of technical field work. 6 to 7,000 responses of open-end data to get through.
change
That
the
doesn't happen in
equation
survey
on
research. That doesn't
how
happen
surveys.
in a
Yeah.
focus group that volume.
Yeah, with people that basically love to answer their questions, basically are helping you to connecting the dots around their user experience or the customer journey, which is and solving specific pain points or specific questions about this journey. I love that. And and when you get a client outcome like that, that really like it, and how do you go out and find more clients like them?
A lot of it is word of mouth, which I know is not a sexy answer, but I think is still high valuable, meaning I've done really good work for a specific client. I've also become really well known in my own network as being the social media researcher.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's misconstrued, and the type of social media research I'm doing is not exactly what it is that they're looking for, or sometimes that's just because they don't understand. So there's a lot of education that ends up happening.
Uh-huh. Let
Um,
come here to educate me. And I imagine that you're very vocal at IIX or Green Book or, all the industry, right? So basically
I
that's cool.
also, knock on wood, knocking on my wood table here, have been blessed with a lot of repeat clients. So a lot of those repeat clients are bringing me different clients, right? So a lot of times I'm working with fellow market researchers or fellow consultants or fellow marketing teams. And so they have different clients that have a similar solution or want to use this methodology for. So I'm getting the exposure that way as well. I would love to be working more directly with brands and directly on the client side. The problem with that is, again, the conversation I mentioned before, is that at the brand side, a lot of times those marketing teams and those influencer marketing teams are not buddy buddy with their research teams. So it's like my services exist as a bridge, but nobody asked for that bridge to be built. Nobody's trying to get to that route. So I'm still having
No,
to
because
come
of the
up
silos, right?
with
Yeah.
the use case in those situations, exactly.
That's a great idea. I have a few questions about AI, but let me ask just one because of the time. So yeah, of course, AI is changing how content is created and how data is analyzed. Where those AI fit into what ScribeQ does? Maybe you already answered some of that. And where do you think it changed the way brands listen to consumer more broadly?
So I think the way that I'm using AI with ScribeQ in the social question is probably going to disappoint some people because I'm not technically using any AI in my solutions that I don't necessarily plan to. There is obviously the possibility of when I'm coding and doing thematics and needing to analyze 6 to 7,000 responses and finding some of that data, but I still don't really consider that AI. Just to knock on the term artificial intelligence, I think it's all advanced analytics, advanced analysis that already exists. LLM potentially, but I don't plan on having an actual artificial solution to Scribe Q into the engagement. I think we really need the human overlay component, the human strategy because not all creators are created equal, right? So, for example, with this perimenopause and menopause conversation that we started on a little while ago, just because a creator talks about perimenopause does not mean they would be a great partner for research. Right? If they don't have community engagement, if they don't have regular interaction, if they're only pushing products or only selling their course and only selling their solution and haven't actually developed a community, I would not want AI to go blindly partner with 10 creators talking about perimenopause because it's missing that engagement strategy that's there. It's going to miss that engagement strategy because Instagram doesn't release those statistics, right? I have to stalk my creators before I approach them for a partnership. So, usually by the time I've gotten a proposal or gotten an outreach, I've got a couple of creators that I've earmarked. I start following them. I start kind of shadowing their community to find out like how engaged they are, how talkative they are, how much dialogue and discussion that they have. I don't think AI is going to get us there anytime soon. So there's the possibility to integrate from a thematics perspective AI into my processes, but right now it's just truly advanced technology versus something that's artificial.
100%. Yeah, I follow that because what you're creating was like an art, like a craft, and is basically take more time, adding those like a variables into the equation to the AI to evaluate something rather just to understand, how everything is basically working together. That makes sense. I mean, but you can integrate technologies in during the process without giving full control.
And
Yeah.
not to harp on AI from an analytics perspective, but One of the times in recent memory that I tried to use an AI coding service for open-end survey data. This was supposed to be the use case for this AI app that I was using. The question that we asked of parents were, "What research are you doing when you're looking for a toy in this category? Like, what are the things you're researching?" And so the number one insight was like, "Parents are researching." I'm like, "I know they're researching." We asked them what they were researching. So telling me that parents' research coming out of this AI model that I just paid for was redundant. Like, I need to know more than that. And I think research data in general is so highly nuanced, so that conversation level. And because I am getting qualitative, loosely worded qualitative data in the thousands, there's just so much room for misinterpretation based on like keyword analysis that it's really hard to just trust AI to code that data and to code it well. Um, so that scaling something is a challenge that I'm going to have to solve.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Probably we'll have a solution, but right now we don't have it yet. And I get your human approach as the best solution for that. So, last two ones. Where do you want the social question ScribeQ to be in 12 to 18 months from now? What does like a win for you?
I would love to get my app to be commercialized. So right now, as we mentioned, I've been using it in private beta testing mode in very closed loop environments with contracts in place. I'm only using it through the means of an actual research collaboration and partnership. But I imagine ScribeQ to become a platform in and of itself, almost like a social intelligence platform. So let me give you an example. I have seen a lot of creators, especially as we enter summertime and travel and time off, ask how people feel about Airbnbs versus hotel stays. Right? Very common social media conversation. Do you prefer to stay in a stranger's home or do you prefer to stay with amenities in a hotel? People are asking these questions left and right with no cohesive umbrella, right? But if I have creators who are opted into ScribeQ and they're using ScribeQ for their own use cases, I would love to mine that data so that I can say, okay, these 10 creators in the last 3 months all asked a question about vacation in some capacity, or all asked a question about hotel stays versus Airbnbs. And because they all used a Scribe Q, we have access to that data and we can come up with our own industry reports of what's happening. It might not be queryable like it would be in a social intelligence perspective, but it's still social conversations being reported on. The challenge with that would obviously be the creators opting in, lots of people using the services for their own component, and then I wanna activate those creators in a way to compensate them because that's one of my quality pillars that I have at the social question is I don't undercharge people or shortchange people for their time. If a creator is going to voluntarily use ScribeQ, and if I use their data in a report, I'm going to figure out how it's either a cost per response or a cost per report or some kind of like give back that they can earn so that they can start monetizing research. I think if we can get creators and influencers more involved in research ecosystems, we are going to completely change the game for data collection. But we have to get them to care because they're the gatekeeper in that instance.
Love that mission. Love that. If you have a magic wand, this is the last one, to fix just one thing in your business right now, one thing that is slowing you down or holding you back, what will it be?
I mean, I think it would just be market research awareness. So I mentioned before that I have to educate and coach and explain to influencers, creators, their agents, their managers what a paid interview is or why I want them to host or ask questions. I think there's too many people ironically in the dark about market research as an industry. Even though everybody, literally everybody, even my 8-year-old nephews has taken a survey in their life. They have provided feedback or input. They have hit a happy face, a mad face or a neutral face when they left an airport bathroom giving the condition on something. We are surveyed everywhere, but nobody knows that that work is actually research. There's such a cognitive disconnect between
Separation and disconnection.
those worlds. I want to bring more awareness to the non-researcher about research, its impact, its a benefit when it's used the right way. We just hear the term and that phrase, do your research, is so weaponized on social media that it's lost its meaning. I would love for that to be the next positive generating content, not just for myself, but for also marketing research, because I think that would solve a lot of the quality problems, a lot of the participation problems, a lot of the authenticity and trust problems that we're seeing in traditional research, is because people don't understand. And we have to figure out a way to like educate and educate at scale to stop that mis and disinformation. That research is not bad. Collecting data is not bad. Learning more about your habits and behaviors and your buying patterns is not bad. um, we have to get more people on board and educated. It is my biggest wish.
Really, you're making research fun. That is basically one of the key things about research and how we can change that, right? Like a part of our normal life. So yeah,
I know we
mhm,
didn't have time to get into it, but that whole idea that I'm making research fun, I am a staunch believer that marketing research does not have a response problem. We have an engagement problem because people are very
100%.
willing to answer surveys and to
Yes,
share
yes, they like
feedback,
to be heard.
but we have to
They
meet
like
them
to be
where they
heard. But if it's 40 minutes and a structured questionnaire, oh my God, really? I don't want to answer this. I want to answer other things, maybe about this topic. But yeah, 100%. Katie, it has been like a very fascinating, and I would like to have more time, talking about more things. You're building something the research industry really needs, and they didn't know that they need. Thank you so much for your openness. Okay.
Absolutely. I'm open to a part 2 anytime.
Perfect. Sounds good. So I will